So I went down the pendulum check rabbit hole Sunday night. Today is Monday. It is Monday, November the 18th when I'm recording it. It's about 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I've got about 3 pages of notes for us to walk through. First one is say, thank you for all the participation and the responses. Thank you for all of the people asking extra questions. What I want you to know is I wrote down every single question and I had so many I didn't know which ones to do. So what did I do? I used my pendulum check. And Spirit Team weighed in, and every single one of these questions that I'm going to be providing for you, this was guided by Spirit Team. Now, there are questions that I personally want to show you that they will not let me show you. And then there are some questions that I just really didn't want to do. And they're like, Dana, you need to do these. So this is a very guided pendulum check. The first thing Spirit Team wants me to share with you has to do about tracking. If you haven't seen my video about false positives on pendulum checks, go watch that video and listen to what I have to say about tracking. So when I do a pendulum check, yes, we do want solid information. We do want results. That's the masculine. That's the logic, rationale, results, structure, mind space. But then we also want to do that unfolding, intuitive, what's going on space. That's the tracking space. That's the feminine. That's the sacred feminine. Really good pendulum checking work does both. It gets us to some solid places and as solid answers as we can get. And it also shows more of a landscape as far as tracking. And as I do this over a period of time, you are going to see the information shift, change, unfold. And I will be showing you some of that today. So the first thing Spirit Team wanted me to weigh in on is what's going on with our recheck for POTUS for the office in January of 2025. Trump is still sitting on a resounding no. Harris has shifted over to the full positive. If you remember from this last pendulum check that I did, she was moving from a graduated space of not very solid movement, just beginning to head into the yes. And if you are new with this, just remember, my midpoint is straight up and down. My pendulum on the right is a no. My pendulum landing on the left is a yes. Okay. So that said about rechecks for Harris and Trump, let's move on to the first question that Spirit Team wanted me to work with. It calls into question this idea that if this election that we just went through was messed with, and if the 2020 election was messed with, I started asking a couple weeks ago, when was our last free and fair U.S. presidential election? And for kicks and grins, I pulled up the Britannica website for all of the presidential elections. I pendulum checked through every single presidential election in their year. And guess where it flipped? We had free and fair elections all the way up to and through the John F. Kennedy election, that election, November 8th, 1960, where we elected John F. Kennedy into office, that was our last free and fair U.S. presidential election, according to my pendulum. Every election since then, it swung into the no category on my midpoint. It was a solid no. So every other election since has been tampered with, and that began with Lyndon B. Johnson and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So there's been this conversation hanging out in the air about our 2024 election and what's potentially going on. This 2024 election, was this most recent American presidential election a sting operation? And that came back as a solid yes. And so I wanted to know, okay, when did that sting operation begin to happen? And so the question is, how long have the Democrats and or Biden and or Harris been in preparation of this election sting? Folks, it began back in 2016 when Trump won the first time. And Biden came in on it in 2020. Harris came in on it in 2020. So they have been working on this for quite a few years. The turning point year was 2016. So that just goes to show how long, the long game on our elections is happening behind the scenes. Okay, let's move on to the next page. We're going to move into the legal process, but to do that, Spirit Team wants me to do a review. This is from our last pendulum check. I was pendulum checking when we're going to see legal movement on evidence collection. And at the time that I posted, it was just at the precipice the Alfie Oaks raid had happened. I know how to pendulum check calendars, and my pendulum check came out just ahead of the poly tech thing, and then we've potentially got another one coming up this week. My pendulum picked up on a 4th, and that was hanging in the air, and it occurred to me, oh, this is evidence collection of specific evidence collection. The 4th may very well be the evidence of a recount. So let's swing back over to here. Let's ask this. Will the legal proceedings Harris files for this presidential election unravel things beneath the surface that we usually never see? Spirit Team was very clear about me asking this one, and this came back not only with a very profound, solid, energetic yes from the pendulum. I heard the word indubitably, and that's without question. Just remember, all of this is beginning to happen as Pluto is doing a sign change into Aquarius, where we are leaving that whole kind of Capricorn autocratic structure into more community, humanitarianism, focus on the people, focus on the network. So just remember that this all is happening under the auspice of Pluto changing signs, and that what happens with this sting operation may very well also unravel all kinds of other things. Okay, this was coming up in comments. I've been hearing this around, this collective question of, will the United States stay intact? And some of the questions are like, are we going to have World War III? And is there going to be a revolution? Is there going to be a civil war? It's all these violent questions. And Spirit Team has been very clear about staying out of that energy. And there's a solid sense from them of, no, the United States stays intact. We're going to get into the form of what that looks like. The United States stays intact. But they did want us to know 2020 was the last stable election. We are going to go through a transformation, and I couldn't get much other information, but there's going to be other things happening. And they wanted to say, get ready to transform as a country. So while we are very focused on seeing Kamala Harris seated as the president, we also need to open up our scope and be very aware that this kicks off. This is not an ending, folks. This is a gateway opening. This kicks off a time of getting ready to transform as a country. Just an FYI, as I started doing this, they started channeling to me. They want to be very clear, and there's compassion and empathy here. They're basically saying, we are so sorry that you all are having to go through the tumult of all of this, but basically this process that we're going through, it's causing us to see the nature of this process is currently showing everyone's true colors in extreme conditions, and this is necessary for a true and complete transformation to take place. That whole FAFO, the F around and find out thing that's going on right now, and how we've all been in emotional tumult. That right here, this is us. It's what I call the cosmic EQ vote. And the cosmic EQ vote, what I've learned about over time is the cosmic EQ vote is basically where you are choosing, where you're making your emotional decision to land with everything. And that places you on a specific timeline. So be very careful how you are cosmically EQ voting, because that's placing you on certain timelines for certain outcomes for your life. So this that we're in right now, what we're going through, no matter how gut-wrenching it is it's an incredibly important piece of the process. So as I was curious as to if we're going through all of this type of transformation, then what form is the United States government, what form of us as a United States is going to take place? So I just kind of started playing around. Are we going to stay in the corporatocracy, the democratic corporatocracy that we're in right now? The answer came back as a no. Are we going to land in a true democracy? Partially. Are we going to do fascism? That came back as a solid no. And the last one that really landed the strongest was some kind of decentralized government that is democratic in nature. So just know as we go through this entire process and the landscape keeps changing, we're moving into a very new time that very could redefine how we are collectively structured as a societal government here in the United States. Okay, let's move on to the last page here. Pretty obvious one. Did our election machines get tampered with this election? That came back as a solid yes. Really important question. Will the Harris presidential recount and legal actions affect seats in the House? That came back as a solid no. Seats in the Senate. My pendulum went bananas. That came back as a solid yes. So whatever Harris is doing or going to do, we may see some seats change because of it. Then, will we officially hear about recount proceedings? Possibly. That's going to happen sometime this week. Now, one of the things you guys need to know is the last pendulum check that I did pull up and do the pendulum check on recounts or revoting, and the answers that I got back were so swampy I couldn't use them. That was not solid pendulum checking evidence. And so I am not, I don't feel very confident about whatever's going on with recounts or revotes. So I'm going to put this out here. I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know how solid this evidence is, but what I will say, what's more solid that Spirit Team was pointing out is that they could not emphasize enough how Pluto moves into Aquarius the 19th of November this week, and how much that all of these proceedings going on is going to connect into threads unraveling that causes transformational change for our entire government and our entire societal system. Then, big shift on information. This question right here, I did not want to do this. I do not like future telling, fortune telling, especially whether people will live or die. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. Spirit Team wanted me to put this in. If Kamala continues along the course of collecting legal information and doing a recount and putting all of that together, Spirit Team wanted me to ask the pendulum, does Donald Trump stay alive through January 20th? The answer came back as no. They want to be very clear that Donald Trump's health is not good. It continues to deteriorate, and as this moves forward, especially after Pluto moves into Aquarius, he will not be doing well from a health perspective. We all need to be aware of that. Then the last thing that's landing, as far as how this is all going to happen and unfold, Spirit Team gave me very specific dates for when this happens in December. They will not allow me to release them for my own safety. So all I can tell you guys is, remember how in the last pendulum check I said it would be the very back end of December that we would see movement on this, and it would be very quiet. All of that has changed. I'm beginning to see the landscape more, and the pendulum is confirming we will see movement in December, and it's probably going to be around sometime in mid-December. And on top of that, more than anything, Spirit Team wants me to emphasize that December is going to be a political mess. Let's just put it this way. Enjoy your Thanksgivings with what's left of family, if it hasn't been blown apart by the FAFO. Because December is going to be a bumpy ride. There may very well be a lot of political upheaval. We will hear about things. There will be movement. Buckle up, people. We are in for a ride. If you are looking for a final outcome on this and then this all getting settled, that's not what's going to be happening. There's going to be a bumpy ride, and then through that gateway, we are headed into a very transformational time.